Hey, welcome back. Today I'm working on Kattis problem Quadrant. So this is Python 3 I'm starting with, and to read in the two lines of input, the first line of input is the integer x, the second line of input contains the integer y, and then I'm going to go through some conditionals. So the first if statement is if x is greater than 0 and y is greater than 0, print 1 for quadrant 1. Quadrant 2 is going to be x is negative, y is positive. Quadrant 3 has x as negative and y as negative. And else is the final statement, quadrant 4. So if it doesn't meet any of the above conditions, it must be in quadrant 4. Ran through the sample input and output. Everything looks good. So let's get that one submitted and move on to coding the same problem in C++. So as always, we start with the hashtag include iostream using namespace standard int main. And for this problem, we're going to define integers x and y. And then I'll just hop over to the tutorial website I like to use and double check the syntax for if-else statements. So we have if, first statement in parentheses followed by a bracket, and then any else or else if statements follow the same syntax with the conditions in parentheses following else if or else, and then a bracketed instruction. Alright, so after reading in line 1 and 2, the first integer for x in the first line and then the second line of input containing integer y, we're going to create the if loops. So first quadrant is going to be if x is greater than 0 and y is greater than 0. In C++, like Python, we're just using the word and. Cout 1. So in the next line of code, I'm going to have an else if. It's not just else because there's more than two options here. So the last final option is going to be else because all other conditions have been eliminated. But for the second and third ones, we want to use an else if statement. So if x is negative and y is positive, we're going to output 2, cout 2. And then the third statement, similarly, now x and y are both negative. So else if conditions in parentheses, x is less than 0 and y is less than 0. And then open brackets. You'll notice once you hit return after an open bracket, it will automatically output a closed bracket. And then the instruction, cout is 3. And then our final statement, else cout 4. We don't have to specify that x is positive and y is negative because that's the only remaining outcome. So let's run through a test example using sample input 1, 10, and 6. Gives us quadrant 1. So it looks like it's working. 0.9, negative 13 gives quadrant 4. Great, so let's copy the code, paste it into the Kattis space, and submit. Running through all test cases, passed. Alright, and finally, let's go back in and code this in Java. So just changing the programming language and switching over to my online compiler. I promise soon I'm going to start using Visual Studio Code. I've just been a little lazy, and this works for now. Okay, so because we are reading in data, I'm going to keep that import java.util.scanner at the top. It's importing the scanner class that we'll use in the main class. I'm changing that to public class quadrant. It doesn't really matter in this case. Just trying to get in the habit of doing that. So public class quadrant, public static void main. And next, to use the scanner class, I'm going to create an object. So I'm just going to name it point since that's what we're reading in using the scanner class. Scanner point equals new scanner system.in. And then we need to define the variables as integer data types. X and Y for my coordinate pair of the point we're reading in. And then X is going to be point the scanner object above dot next int. So using the built-in method in the scanner class to read in the first line of input. And doing the same with Y equals point from the object point dot next int. And now we're ready to go through the if loops, just like in Python and C++. So there are some things that are different about the syntax in Java. It's less English based in some cases than Python, which is why Python is really easy when you're first learning it, because a lot of it, you're using like sentence type of spelling and reserved words and things like that, so it's pretty easy to pick it up. Here I'm using and. I'm trying to use and spelled out A-N-D as the and operator. But as I'll see when I run it shortly, that's not the and operator in Java. But we're going to use the same basic logic here. If X is positive and Y is positive, then it's in quadrant 1. So I'm trying to do something different here. With instead of just printing out the quadrant, saying Q equals 1, and then at the end of the if loop, doing a system.out print line with whatever the value of Q is. So we'll see if that works. Else if X is negative and Y is negative, quadrant 3, else. And again, you don't need to specify that X is positive and Y is negative, because by process of elimination, that's the only outcome. So we'll run it and get some errors here. So here I'm trying to figure out what the error is. It's pointing at the conditions specified in the conditionals. So the part in parentheses of the if, else if, and else statements. So here I'm going back to the W3 school site, just making sure my syntax matches. There's no or and operator examples here, so I'm going to go to the topic called Java Operators and see how they denote logical and there you go. Java logical operators is an and or an ampersand symbol. So let's replace those with the double ampersand and try it again. Okay, so not popping up any errors yet. Let's do a test case with sample input 10 and 6 as the point coordinates. That seemed to work. Now let's try with 9, negative 13, and it outputs 4. So that's another way to do it. Instead of printing out a line in each conditional statement, you can just define what the variable, in this case q for quadrant, is, and then print it out at the end. And I'm sure there's many more ways to do this. I'm just showing one possible way. So this was the quadrant problem from Kattis in Python 3, C++, and Java. Next problem, in my next video, I'm going to be doing the pot problem. So I'll see you in the next one.